For 500 years, the world map has been built around warm water. A ship leaving Asia for Europe bends through Malacca, passes India, waits at Suez, and enters the Mediterranean. Oil moves through Hormuz. Containers move through Panama. Trade has always followed the same rule. Find the narrow gap, then fight to control it. But at the very top of the planet, a different map is beginning to appear. Not a canal, not a strait, not one gate that can be blocked by one crisis. A frozen ocean is becoming a seasonal corridor. And if that corridor keeps opening, it could redraw the logic of global power. This is the Arctic route that could break the world map. Look at the world through shipping lanes, and geography becomes the machine underneath everything. Suez shortens the route between Asia and Europe. Panama links the Atlantic and Pacific. Hormuz is a pressure point for energy. Malacca is one of the most important passages for manufactured goods. These are not just places, they are choke points, and choke points create leverage. If a war, blockade, drought, or stranded vessel interrupts one of them, the cost does not stay local. It moves through fuel prices, insurance rates, delivery times, factories, and military planning. For decades, the answer was simple: protect the old routes. But climate, technology, and power politics are now creating a new question. What happens if the shortest route is no longer through the middle of the world, but over the top of it? The Arctic has always tempted mapmakers. A route across the north could cut distance between parts of Asia and Europe. Some modeling suggests Arctic passages could reduce maritime distance by as much as 40%, and transport time by roughly 30% between Europe and northwestern Asia under certain route scenarios. But for most of history, that shortcut was locked behind ice. Now the ice is changing. NASA's sea ice indicator puts the September decline at 12.2% per decade. NOAA says the 2025 Arctic maximum was the lowest in the satellite record, and that the 2025 ice cover was younger, thinner, and 28% less extensive than it was in 2005. That matters because old, thick, multi-year ice used to be the Arctic's wall. Younger ice is weaker. Thinner ice is more mobile. Open water lasts longer in more places. But the Arctic is not becoming a blue water highway overnight. NSIC warns that storms, shifting ice, and fast-moving ice edges can still turn route planning into a gamble. Ice can drift back into shipping lanes within hours. Darkness, distance, and limited rescue capacity remain serious constraints. So the route is not safe. It is not easy. It is not ready to replace Suez. But it is becoming possible enough to matter. There is not one Arctic route. There are several. The Northern Sea route runs along Russia's Arctic coast toward the Bering Strait. The Northwest Passage threads through the Canadian Arctic archipelago. And further into the future, a central Arctic route could cross closer to the North Pole. Each one changes the map differently. The Northern Sea route matters now because it follows Russia's coastline. In 2025, it saw 103 transit voyages by 88 vessels, moving an estimated 3.2 million tons of cargo. That is tiny compared with the world's main shipping arteries. But it is no longer imaginary. It is also fragile. The 2025 season lasted roughly 4.5 months, and difficult ice conditions meant the open water window may have lasted no more than about 2 weeks late in the season. That is the Arctic paradox. Commercially, the route is still niche. Strategically, it is already serious. To understand why, look at Greenland. On a normal world map, Greenland looks like a frozen edge. But on an Arctic map, it sits close to the center of the contest. It watches the approaches between North America, Europe, and the Arctic Ocean. It sits near future route options. And beneath the ice-free parts of the island are resources that matter to clean energy, electronics, and advanced defense supply chains. Size notes that only about 20% of Greenland is ice-free, but the island still ranks 8th globally for rare earth reserves, with around 1.5 million tons. Rare earths are not just mining trivia. They matter for magnets, sensors, wind turbines, weapon systems, and the technologies every major economy says it needs. Then there is Pituffik Space Base in northwest Greenland. It is the northernmost U.S. military installation with missile warning, missile defense, and space surveillance functions. On the old map, that looks remote. On the Arctic map, it looks like a front row seat. Greenland is not just land. It is a radar platform, a mineral frontier, an alliance question, and a gateway to the high north. The route changes the value of the island, and the island changes the value of the route. Russia already has the longest Arctic coastline, and the Northern Sea route runs through its northern maritime space. That gives Moscow a geographic advantage no other power can simply copy. NATO says Russia has increased military activity in the region, including Arctic command structures, airfields, deep-water ports, and former Soviet-era sites. China is different. It is not an Arctic state, but it has been trying to make itself an Arctic stakeholder. In 2018, China released its first Arctic policy, described itself as a near-Arctic state, and linked Arctic development to the Belt and Road Initiative through the Polar Silk Road concept. Rand assesses China's progress as mixed. Many ambitions remain limited or blocked. But Chinese companies are among frequent users of Russia's Northern Sea route, especially for energy flows, and Chinese activity in infrastructure, communications, transport, and resources creates strategic concerns for Arctic states. The real alarm is not that Chinese ships will dominate the Arctic tomorrow. It is that China and Russia are learning to operate in a region where most countries have very little experience. Rand notes China-Russia Coast Guard cooperation, joint naval patrols near Alaska, bomber flights inside the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone, and Chinese naval activity in the Bering Sea. The Arctic route is not just a shortcut. It is a training ground for power. That is why NATO is moving north. In 2026, NATO launched Arctic Sentry, a multi-domain activity in the high north, citing Russia's increasing military activity and China's growing Arctic interest. The point is not only to sail more ships or fly more aircraft. It is to build awareness. Cables, ports, airspace, satellite links, radar zones, and routes that may become more valuable every decade. The Arctic allies said in May 2026 that the region is quickly becoming a sphere of increasing geopolitical strategic importance, driven by Russia's military activity and China's growing strategic interest. That sentence is the story. The old choke points still matter. Suez still matters. Panama still matters. Hormuz and Malacca still matter. But the Arctic adds a new layer. And when a new layer appears on the map, every old calculation changes. The Arctic route may not replace the world's warm water highways soon. It may remain seasonal, risky, expensive, and dependent on icebreakers for years. But strategy does not wait for perfection. It moves when possibility appears. A thinner ice pack, a shorter route, a radar base in Greenland, a Russian coastline, a Chinese Polar Silk Road, a NATO operation in the high north. One by one, these pieces are turning the top of the planet from a frozen blank space into a contested corridor. And that is how the world map breaks, not all at once, but quietly from the top down.